But to me, and I think to all of you, and more importantly, as a Cuban American, he's 100% Cuban and has never forgotten his homeland. As he said in his movie, "My cause is my lost city." Please join me in welcoming to the stage the better-looking Andy Garcia.
Thank you, Andy. First, I'd like to say that you overstated my tennis prowess. It wasn't that I was good, it's that everyone around me was not very good. And secondly, I'd like to thank the Garcia Miami for hosting this event and having us here. I've had a number of privileged moments here at the Cosford Theater over the years. First, when I was a member here of the Miami community before I moved to Los Angeles. There was a Cinematheque here that I used to come see films, and then later on we presented the first screenings of The Lost City here at the Bill Cosford Theater under the invitation, the hosting of Governor Jeb Bush and his wife. And so this place has a lot of great memories for me. We also showed the child documentary here many years ago, and so it's a great place to come home to. You know, Andy kind of missed a couple things in the introduction. First is Andres Arturo Garcia Menendez. I want to forget the Menendez side, or else I could be in trouble. And also, I just want to get into a little brief background. So some people who, you know, there's a lot of misinformation out there sometimes, and what's important for me to be here today is to really to share a conversation with you. I'm not really interested in hearing myself talk, but I am interested in hearing what you guys have to say and what you would like to know from me, if anything. So I'll keep my little section of the afternoon or the morning short, so we can engage in some constructive conversation. But like Andy said, I was born in Cuba, in Havana, in the province of Havana, in the city of Havana. My parents had a home just outside the city, about 20 minutes, half an hour, in a town called Bejucado, which is a rural town, farming town. My father was a lawyer and a farmer. His farms were in an area outside of Bejucado called Buenaventura. It was a very rich area in soil. And we also had an apartment that we would, in the city, that we used to go specifically on the weekends, or mainly in the summers, in an area called El Náutico, El Club Náutico. My grandfather and grandmother on my mother's side, the Menendez family. My grandfather was secretario they translate this in English. It's sort of like the electoral college or the electoral branch of the government that helped with the elections, and he was the secretary of that branch. So he was sort of a government official, bureaucrat type, very organized man. A man who used to I don't know what I'm thinking about this, but you'll get a kick out of it. When he came, he was the last of the family to come from Cuba. My father had no son, no brothers or sister. His father died at the age of 54. And on my mother's side, she had one brother. So the family was very small, and we all came in 1961, about 2.5 years after the revolution. The last sort of straw for my father in terms of staying in Cuba was when they passed the Patria Potestad law, which basically you lost the rights over your children to the state, or to the government. And then I believe it was at 11 years old, you had to engage in obligatory military service until I believe it was the age of 22. And then the children of my age, 5 years old, would go into the state educational program, which had quickly become motivated by more of an indoctrinational program. So my father, who was also involved at the time clandestinely through the Peter Pan movement, helping kids leave the country. A lot of you are probably familiar with the Peter Pan movement through Monsignor Walsh here in Miami. We came over first, and my father stayed trying to, he had an idea that he would plant his last crop, since they had sort of confiscated all his funds and, nationalized everything in the country. He had a crop that he had invested in, that he was hoping that he could ship to his first cousin, Andy Garcia, who I'm named after my godfather, to Tampa, where they lived, and they had a produce. Then my father was also in the produce business there. He was farming, but the cucumbers that he planted, the seeds were all bad and nothing grew. So he finally came into. Can I help you, sir? Yeah. You don't have to kneel in front of me. That's okay. We'll get to that later. So we were here. We came. My mother and the children came over like many exiles. I remember my mother very vividly borrowing a dime at the airport to call my godfathers to tell him that we had arrived. And then my father finally came about months later on a plane that was bringing some of the Peter Pan children, and he asked the pilot to reserve him a seat. And then he was going to go back one more time, and my grandmother, who was still there, like on the Menendez side, said, "Don't come back because they're looking for you." So he ended up staying, and my grandfather.
Sorry.
No, so go ahead, share it with us. If it's your wife, I'll talk to her. So my grandfather came over a little bit later, and when he arrived, he said, "Abuelo, what would you like? Is there something you would like?" We all lived in one house in Miami Beach, home we were renting there, and we had converted the garage as a place for my grandparents to live. And he said, "All I want is a rocking chair." He was already in his 70s. He said, "A rocking chair, a nail set, to fix your nails, leather thing with all the clippers and stuff, and a radio that I can listen to, and a harmonica." And he lived the rest of his life, sitting in his rocking chair, listening to the news or the novelas or the danzones, and playing the harmonica and fixing his nails. And he was a very fastidious man with a great sense of humor. Never spoke English. I'd come home from school and say, "Hey, abuelo, how you doing?" He'd go, "Get up and out, king." And I said, "Okay." Which meant nothing. It was gibberish. Speaking English to me. But he would, I don't know why I got on this tangent, but he would take a little, in the nail thing, he had a little 6-inch ruler, and he'd put the ruler on the table and put his nail to it, and measure the center to the midpoint of his nail, and mark it with a pencil, and then he'd file it down like that. When you work behind a desk for the government, I guess you get a lot of time on your hands. But he was a beautiful man with a very high moral standard, and we'd get into arguments, my brother and my sister and I'd complain to him, and he'd always say, "I have to hear the other side of the story first." And so we grew up in Miami Beach in the early 60s. My father never practiced law again. My mother worked as a secretary for my godfather, who had a division of their produce business here near Miami Stadium, across the street from Miami Stadium. I guess it's still there. And my father went to sell sneakers and socks, and he worked in the catering business next to the Orange Bowl, a cantina, and eventually, about a year and a half later, was able to purchase the cantina, and never really did very well with it, but the entire Miami Beach exile community ate very well.